In this episode, I have a Grundig TK6. This is a portable reel-to-reel that uses up to 4.5-inch reels. Dates back to 1963 to 1965 is when they made this unit. It's a half-track mono. Let's see if we can get it working. Well, it's Vintage Sunday, and today I have an old vintage Grundig. This one's an old TK6. This is a reel-to-reel machine that was given to me. If I can open this up without breaking it. There we go. I noticed that the little window here has to be glued back in, but that shouldn't be a big deal. I have no idea whether this thing works or not because I've yet to plug it in. And I do so happen that I have a small 3-inch reel of tape that I can actually put on this thing to record from that transicoder, right? So I'll use that tape. I already spooled up. We'll test this thing out and see whether this thing is going to do anything. Kind of a cool old machine. So let's connect it up and see first of all if it does anything. Now, as we can see, this one supports 1 7/8 and 3 3/4 IPS. Before I spool up a tape, I'm going to plug it in and see whether it turns on. Oh, wonderful cord. I'll have to fix that at some point, but that's how I got it. We'll plug this thing in and see whether when I turn it on, if it makes any noise, which it does. I hear a motor running. We'll just remove this cover and expose the head, and I see that the capstan shaft is turning, and that's a really good sign. This thing might even work. You know, right out of the gate, this thing might work. Let's just see first of all whether the functions work, whether the tape moves. So we'll try the first button here is the play button. Looks like that works. Pinch roller does not have a lot of grip on it, but I'm sure I can restore that. And there's sufficient torque on the take up. How about fast forward? How does fast forward? Rewind. It's got a record button here. That'd be a pause. So that would stop it. Yep, that's your pause button. Take it. This is probably the playback level, and this is good. That's the record level. What is this one? It's got an on-off, but it has a control there. What does it do? Tone. Okay, that's a tone. This is the volume and record level. Got a tape counter on here too that is controlled by the supply side. This thing might even work. I'm going to remove the back cover. There's a little catch on the side here. I push that catch in. This should actually, that releases it. Ah, there we go. That's the back cover off of it. What do we got back here for inputs and outputs, if anything? Well, it looks like this thing can operate on batteries as well. Here's the battery compartment. Looks like you can put in a bunch of D-size cells. Looks like it's going to take about 6 of them. It's got a speaker on the back. And a fuse here. It's got to be on the side. Ah, here's the inputs and the outputs on the right side. So I'll show you that. Put that back on. On the right side here, here's a microphone. And it's got DIN plugs. But I don't have a cord for it. What's in here? Ah, there's the cord. So here's our microphone. Unwind the cord here. That's kind of cool. Place to wind up the cord. I guess the microphone has a stand so that you can stand it up like that to do your recording. And the microphone plugs into the microphone socket on the side. Well, it looks like it does plug into this one because that's the only one that it fits. And there's a little switch here that says I and O. Maybe that's input and output. Well, let's just see whether we get any volume through this thing. I'm just going to try putting this thing in record. And, let's see. That's exactly what that does. So this microphone actually goes through the speaker, and I can record the record level here. What does the tone control do? Oh, interesting. Okay, so on record, the tone control affects the speaker, so you can hear yourself through the speaker on this thing, or you turn the tone control down, and you don't. Now I see there's a piece of plastic that's broken in here. I'm just going to see if I can pick that out and maybe get this meter to work. Okay. I don't know if that meter's going to work or not. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't see it moving. It's probably buggered up. Let's see if I can just free it up here. I can see the needle right down here. And it looks like it's been bent. So maybe I can unbend it a bit. Make it move. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hello, hello, hello. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. My VU meter's not moving. It's like something's pulling it back too. Okay. Turn it off and see if it frees up at all. No. It's like the spring is pulling it back. Well, let's thread this tape up and see whether I can play back anything that I recorded on that tape on that little transcorder, which obviously it's going to be the wrong speed, but let's just see whether I'll get any sound out of this thing. I don't want to use the microphone obviously, but I think if I open the mic up, I can probably clip on to a music source, and we'll see what this thing's capable of right out of the box without doing anything to it. Okay, power on. We'll try just playing this tape first. See whether this tape plays.
Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this channel, you can support me many ways. You can do it either through PayPal.
Now remember, this was recorded on the transcorder, which is the rim drive, no capstan. I'm playing it back at 1 7/8. So if I put this to 3 3/4, how will it sound? Probably too fast.
But you can do it through Patreon. The address is on the screen there. And also you can send me old equipment. If you've got
A piece of equipment you think I might be interested in, whether it's a tape recorder or CD player.
well, anything that's rare. Okay, I'm more of a collector of the old equipment.
So the transcorder obviously records at a speed somewhere between 1 7/8 and 3 3/4. Sounds like it's more like about 2 inches per second.
Than the newer stuff. But if you got a piece that that you
Or like either repair it or you don't want it repaired and you just want to find a home for it, I will accept them as
a donation, which is what I've done with this one.
So that's enough from that. I want to see if this thing records. So let's just rewind this tape a bit here. And we'll make a recording. We'll try it at 1 7/8, and we'll also try it at 3 3/4. I'm going to try and put some music on this thing. It's cool. I don't even have to take this thing apart. I was expecting I was going to have to restore this thing, and it looks like it's working. So let's try recording. So I'll hit record button. I'll turn down the gain here on the speaker and click start. Okay, now we're recording. I have no idea what my record level is because the meter here seems to be a bit buggered up. But I've got the record level set to, about 6 here, and we'll see how this sounds. If I turn up this control, I'll actually hear my voice going through the amplifier, as you can hear. And this is being recorded at 1 7/8 IPS, which would be adequate for voice recordings, but not very adequate for music. So let's switch the speed to 3 3/4 right now, and then we'll see how the sound is. So let's switch to 3 3/4 right now. So the unit's now operating at 3 3/4, and I didn't stop the tape or anything to do it. I just did it on the fly. So when we play this back, we'll do the same. We'll just take a listen to this difference in the sound quality for vocal recording on this old Grundig model. What was it? Did I say it was a TR6? What's the model of this thing here? TK6. Grundig TK6. So let's rewind the tape now, and we'll listen to that, and then I'm going to hook this thing up and do some music recording on it and see how music sounds. So we'll start it at 1 7/8. Now I can turn the tone control up.
Okay, now we're recording. I have no idea what my record level is because the meter here seems to be a bit buggered up. But I've got the record level set to about 6 here, and we'll see how this sounds. If I turn up this control, I'll actually hear my voice going through the amplifier, as you can hear. And this is being recorded at 1 7/8 IPS, which would be adequate for voice recordings, but not very adequate for music. So let's switch the speed to 3 3/4 right now, and then we'll see how the sound is. So let's switch to 3 3/4 right now. So the unit's now operating at 3 3/4, and I didn't stop the tape or anything to do it. I just did it on the fly. So when we play this back, we'll do the same. We'll just take a listen to this difference in the sound quality for vocal recording on this old Grundig model. What was it? Did I say it was a TR6? What's the model of this thing here? TK6. Grundig TK6. So let's rewind the tape now, and we'll listen to that, and then I'm going to hook this thing up and do some music recording on it and see how music sounds.
So what we've just learned here is that the tone control is actually backwards. As I was turning the tone control up to 9, it became more bass sounding, so it actually rolled off the high frequencies. But when you turn it to 9, that's your monitor for your speaker. So how they've wired the control, it's functioning as a monitor control on record. When you turn it to 9, it gets louder. When you turn it to 1, there's no sound, so you don't get feedback. And on playback, it's the opposite. 1 is full fidelity, and 9 is reducing the treble, which is kind of interesting the way that they've done it. Plus, this control functions as your volume on playback, which is kind of cool. We are going to take this thing apart, by the way, in this video. I'm just trying it out now. I'm going to pull this thing apart, and we're going to see how well this thing's built. But I just want to play around with this a bit and see how it records. So right now, what I want to do is I want to give it a line level input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually open the microphone so that I can access the microphone element, and we'll just clip onto my music player here, and we'll try recording some music on it. So a couple of screws removed from the back, the microphone just pops open. As you can see, it's just a dynamic microphone in here. So I'll be able to just clip on to the wires here with my little jumpers. I don't even have to disconnect it. I'll just clip onto the wires coming out of the microphone, and that will allow me to give it a low level input. The nice thing about this is I can actually turn the level down, right? So let me just get some jumpers. We'll jumper that in, and then we'll try this thing out for recording music. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing apart, and I'm going to try and repair this meter We'll clean up all the controls and stuff in it, and see if I can get this thing working in perfect condition, so that this can go into my collection of vintage reel-to-reel machines to be put away in the storage unit and never looked at again. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect my positive and negative leads down to the microphone here, and then I'm going to clip it on to this is the output from the media player. Now I should hear sound going through this if I put it in. We'll just rewind this thing, I guess, back to the beginning here. I should hear, which I do. Turn this down a little. That's probably good enough there. We'll be able to actually hear what I'm recording. So I'm just going to cue this tape up, and then we'll find something to play on here. Nice thing about this thing is that, well, I can just use the remote control to pick any song that I want. So I think I'll start with track number 6. So I'll let this record for a few minutes at 3 3/4, and then I'll record the same thing at 1 7/8, so that way we can do a direct comparison as to how it sounds. So let's record this track. While I record that, I'm going to take this opportunity to glue the window back in. I'll just put some crazy glue on here. Now, anybody who had a DirecTV system back in, I'm going to say the late 90s, 98, 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there, when they did their card change, if you didn't have the new access card, all you got was a screen telling you that a message that said you had to change your access card. And this was the music that they had playing in the background. Don't ask me how I know. No, I had a DirecTV system, and I remember the track. They would just play this one. It was actually, I think there was 3 songs they played over and over again. This one is Jack Waldenmayer, Music Bakery. The track is called Vegas. The other track they played was the Neil Schon track, and the third track I think was Ronnie Jordan. But they had 3 songs, and they just played them over and over and over again with the screen that said you had to change your access card. Okay, now we'll record the same thing, same level. Now we're recording at 1 7/8 IPS, so we can hear how bad the sound is compared to 3 3/4 IPS. Something you guys might find interesting is I have the operating instructions for it here on my fancy Samsung tablet. The TK6, here we go. Here's our specifications. Might be a little easier if I do it this way, because then I can zoom up on the English. But here we go, 6 batteries, our car battery, and it'll operate on 110 or 220, 50 or 60 cycles. It's got built-in, of course, fuses and so forth and everything. Let's get down to tape speeds: 3 3/4, 1 7/8. Frequency range, here we go. 3 3/4 will go 50 to 13 kilohertz, and 1 7/8 only goes up as high as 9 kilohertz. And that was pretty much par for the course for 1 7/8. Even cassettes sounded worse than that back in the era of this unit. These machines here were produced between 1963 and 1965. So this unit is between 53 and 55 years old, and it still works. And I haven't done anything to it. And it's been sitting, it has probably been sitting for 40 years, maybe longer, without being used. Because the chap that gave me this also gave me a few other he's a musician, and he gave me a few other reel-to-reels. So this would have been relatively early. This would have been an early machine before he bought into his stereo ones, and I doubt that this one has seen much use since he got into his Sonys and even that TAC 4-track. Same fellow that gave me this gave me the TAC 4-track, and he gave me 2 Sonys as well. Now the TAC is the one that's the most useful for me, so that's why I did that video first and overhauled it, because of course that's a beautiful deck and I'm actually going to use that one. The Sonys, whether they get used or sold, I don't know. I've got a lot of reel-to-reel machines, but I found this one to be kind of interesting just because it is a portable. But anyway, let's look some more at the specs. So let's say the specifications isn't very good. 0.2% while in flutter on 3 3/4, 0.4 on 1 7/8, which is not real good. But here we go. Full reel of tape. You can get 2 hours on the 1 7/8 for one side, and I guess 2 sides is 4 hours. Of course, as we continue down here, we figure out what I already figured out. It says monitoring, control, and record, and tone control on playback. And it says monitoring loud and low, and tone is bass and treble. So as we already figured out, I didn't need the manual to tell me that. It basically tells you what we already know. So it's not really useful. I don't know what this is for. There's that plug on the side. And oh, I think that's just, you know what that's for? That's to store the electrical cord, I think, on it. That's what this piece on the side here was. Here. That's to store the electrical cord. You wind the cord up and you can store it in there. But of course the cord's been cut off because it would have had a European plug on it before. And that's what that's for. That would have been to store the actual plug. Let's take a listen to how this sounds. Playing music first, because we recorded the music. Let's see how it sounds playing that music back. You can hear the tone. Lots of volume. So I'm going to play that. This is the 3 3/4. Let's find this and play the 1 7/8 version of this so we can hear the difference in the sound quality and how much poorer it is. Okay, now we'll listen to the same thing at 1 7/8 and see how bad it sounds. Not real good. And you might have even noticed something there at the beginning of that song. I was speaking on camera while I was making the recording. The microphone back here was picking me up, so you can actually hear my voice recorded on the tape. Anyway, I know you guys want to see what's inside this thing, and so do I. So let's take this thing apart and see what makes it tick. I guess I should unplug this before opening it up. See what this one is made of. It's obviously going to be a low voltage motor running this thing because it can run off of batteries. So there's going to be a transformer in here of some type, I would think. What there's the top off. We have a belt drive that drives this, but it's not a conventional belt either. Interesting. Check this out. This is like a fabric type belt. That's not going to stretch. Got a rubber belt over here for the tape counter, but it seems to be, you know, even though the thing's 55 years old, it actually appears to be in relatively good shape. It's a half-track head, which we kind of figured. Assembly and oiling of this precision motor and oil work on it should only be carried out by an expert. But see, this has got the factory paint on here. I almost don't even want to crack that paint because this machine has never been serviced. It's beautiful. Look at this. Like, everything's got the factory paint on it. That's something. That a unit could be this old and it's never been serviced. And that says something to the quality of these old Grundig units. I'm going to take the back cover off of it now. Take out some more screws. Should be able to lift the back cover off this as well as the front, so we can get a look at what else is inside here. There's a couple more screws on the back. One of the reasons I want to try and keep this thing original too is because for collectible value, a unit that hasn't been severely tampered with is going to hold more value than one that's been heavily serviced. Right? Oh, here we go. Now, here's the speaker. There's some plugs on the back here. What is that for? That's for the battery terminal. It's got this big, strong magnet on the speaker too. Here's our main board. It's got a drive wheel in here. Our amplifier board is over here. I'm just going to disconnect the speaker. We're just going to unsolder it down here, and the same with the battery leads, just so I can take the back off this thing a little better, and then I can work on it. I am going to put some rubber renew on the rubber tires because they're slipping a little bit. I found it when I put it into rewind or fast forward, it actually slows down a bit. So it's a rim drive on this thing. It's not. There's no belts. So there's actually the motor is in the bottom here, and there's a rubber tire that actually pushes up against the flywheel here, and then the flywheel is used to drive the rewind and fast forward through this big gear here. Anyway, let me take the speaker out first, then we can go through the operation of this thing. I'll do a little bit of restoration on the rubber parts. I'm not going to change any of the capacitors on here because I don't think any of them are bad. Right? It's working. It's recording and playing. It's got a lot of volume, so I don't think we need to change any parts on this machine to make it work. It seems to be working just fine. I like to see if I can get the meter up here working. We'll take a look at that. But anyway, let me get the speaker out first, then I can get the back off it. So if we look down here, you'll see this is the motor, and it's got two sizes of pulley on it, and there's a rubber roller right inside here that is pushed up against this motor, over against this brass pulley that turns the main capstan shaft. So if I power this thing up, that should start spinning. There it goes. And I'm just going to get in there with some rubber renew, and we'll get some rubber renew on this tire. That should soften that up a bit so that we've got a little bit better grip. Fair bit of crud is coming off these rubber tires, that's for sure. Okay. Probably wouldn't hurt to put a little bit of it on the pinch roller as well, because it's pretty hard and cracked. I shouldn't say cracked, but it's just pretty it's pretty much shot. We'll just clean this off, clean the rubber off with this as well. This will soften up the pinch roller a bit. Now, of course, once I use that, I'm also going to just clean it off with isopropyl alcohol as well, so that there's nothing that's going to be left, no residue can be left that could possibly damage the tape. Not that it really matters, but for good measure, we'll clean the pinch roller again. Make sure there's no residue left behind, and I'll also clean the heads. Well, I've got the part here. Notice that the transistors are in sockets, right? These are socketed transistors. So obviously back in the early 60s, they didn't believe transistors were all that reliable, and it was necessary to put them in a socket so that they could be easily exchanged. Notice something else. Before, the spool was constantly turning, and now it's not. Only when you put it into fast forward, it spins. And rewind, it spins. And that's actually done from this belt here. If you notice maybe this lever was sticking, but the take-up spool is driven from this little belt that goes around the capstan shaft here, and it pushes that up like that. You see, that's what actually makes that turn. Is that belt tension is increased so that it grips. So that might have been why it was maybe this was sticking a bit. That's why that was turning. Normally there is a little bit of tension on here, and this brake actually stops it. Maybe that might have been what it was. It might have been this brake pad wasn't dropping down to fully stop it, because it looks like it's kind of, the rubber here might be a little bit deformed just from sitting all those years. So I bet you that's what it is that brake wasn't stopping it from turning. And even though there's no tension on here, there's always a bit of tension pulling on here, and the brake stops it. That won't move anyway. I mean, we're talking micrograms here, right? But just interesting the way that they built this unit. All the metal parts on here is really quite cool to see this. Well, it might be something physical on this meter, because you notice that it doesn't move. Like even when there might be something jammed down the side, piece of plastic or something that broke here. Because I've got the power unplugged, and this thing should be swinging freely. So I think if I can get this meter out of here, I might be able to see what's holding it up. I just got to figure out how to get it out of this thing. Looks like there's another bracket underneath here that holds it in place, and if I take off these screws on the side here, I might be able to get the meter out to take a look at it. Okay, now I can get at the bracket here to remove. I think this is the bracket for the meter, complete with lock washers on here. So I think what's happened on this unit is something's gotten in there where that plastic is broken and it's jamming. I'm going to bend these little tabs up and remove the meter from this bracket and see if I can actually get the top off of it and free it up. That'd be something. Okay, so there's the meter out, and oh yeah, you can see down inside here it's kind of a bit foobar, but I think I can probably get this meter apart, because usually these things did pop apart like that. And yes, the meter it's jammed. It's jammed really good. Some people might say it's foobar. Just take the little meter out so I can see if I can make this thing, free this thing up. It's sticking pretty good. There's probably some remnants of the plastic cover that broke that are jamming it, but it's not moving. You can see it's actually bent because it's all broken, right? This whole, the magnet, oh, look at that, the magnet's bust. No wonder it doesn't turn. See the magnet here? The magnet's actually broken. I don't hold much hope for this meter working again, because the magnet that's supposed to be glued down in the center of this thing so that the coil can move around it is actually broken. That's why the meter don't work. You've heard the term foobar? I have a feeling that this meter is pretty much foobar. Well, there's nothing I can really do to this meter. It's been damaged too badly, so I'm just going to put it back together. We'll put the meter back in the unit itself. I don't think I'm going to be able to find an old meter like this, but if I come across one, then I can certainly swap it out. But for now, we'll just put this thing back the way it was. I mean, the unit works, right? It records and plays. It just, you don't have a level control, or you have a level control, you just don't have a visual reference as to how loud your recordings are, which is not the end of the world, because a unit of this vintage is probably not going to be used much, if ever, for recording. But it'd still be nice to have a working meter, but not going to happen, not on this one anyway. Okay, now to reconnect the speaker and the old battery box, not that that's going to really ever get used, but we'll reconnect it anyway, and get the back on the unit, and then the front piece, the front cover on it, and then I'll do one final test, and then the unit can go back into wherever, storage. I don't think this thing can operate on batteries anyway, because there's a switch that gets activated when you plug the European type plug, the AC cord, into those holes on the side. There's a switch right here that is activated when you push the cord into the holes on the side, and I believe that's what switches it over to battery. But it's connected just in case. The back just goes on just like that. Front cover goes on. Oops, gotta take the speed selector off first. Front cover just drops in place like that. Held in place by 5 screws, 2 in the bottom and 3 in the front of it. So of course we'll put the head cover on as well. It just snaps in place like that. That's to make threading this a little easier. You just pull the tape through the slot in the bottom here. Quick recording on this thing, and make sure that we're plugged in here. Microphone plugged in. I'll set this down to about recorder level about 3, so I'm not going to be going over. And we'll find a track to play here. Okay, I'm going to pick, I guess, track number 70. I'll just key in 70 and let it rip. Whoop. There we go. So after recording for a while, we'll rewind the tape, make sure it's recorded okay, and then I'm going to close off this video because this one's all done. So we're almost back to the beginning. I did start my tape counter at 0 at the beginning of this thing. Had it recording there for a few minutes. Tape's back to the beginning. Give it a bit of volume. Set the tone to high tone. Oops. That was me. Anyway, that's pretty much the demo of this little unit here. And coming up next will be, well, I've got a couple of other reel-to-reels I'll be working on the next little bit. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you again in the next one real soon. Bye for now.